as President Mills said, the work is not done. And we all know that, and that's probably why we're all here today. Part of getting that work done has been an amazing organization known as the Southern Poverty Law Center. And they use the courts as a way of non-violently moving forward the cause of human rights. And also through their teaching tolerance, they use the schools. So we thought it would be worthwhile to acknowledge this worthy organization, which we have called on quite a few times ourselves for help and always receive that help. So I contacted the outreach coordinator of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and she recommended a gentleman who's going to speak with us today. And I'm so glad she did. He's been in the community already a day and a half, and he has talked to the 5th graders in Lena Whitmore, the UI law students, and the 7th and 8th graders right here yesterday afternoon, and really inspired everyone. And he's also inspired me. So it's my great honor to introduce Jay Singh. He's a 3rd-year law student at the University of Washington, but he's already served 2 apprenticeships with the Southern Poverty Law Center, and he has done a lot of work on anti-bullying in the schools, which is something our task force is also studying. It's my great honor to introduce my friend Jay Singh.
About 15 years ago, Victoria Keenan and her son Jason were driving along a road about 90 miles north of here. They were on their way back from a wedding when Jason dropped his wallet out the window. Victoria pulled over and Jason got out of the car to pick it up. Wallet in hand, he got back in the car, but as they set off, the car backfired. That road ran alongside a 20-acre compound run by the Aryan nations and set up by Richard Butler, the father of the American neo-Nazi movement. Butler and his followers wanted to turn our Northwest into a whites-only homeland, and they wanted to use northern Idaho as their foothold. Each day, they would attend services at a shrine dedicated to Adolf Hitler, and when they weren't worshiping the greatest mass murderer of the 20th century, they conducted combat exercises to prepare for the great race war their leader had warned them about. So when security guards at the compound heard Victoria Keenan's car backfire that night, they thought the first shots of that war had been fired. 3 of them filed into a pickup truck, armed with assault rifles, and sped after the Keenans down the road. They followed them for 2 miles, spraying the back of their car with lead. A bullet hit a rear tire, and the car skidded into a ditch. One of the guards walked up to the driver's side and pulled Victoria out by her hair. He put a gun to her head and he threatened to kill her. He asked her if she was a Native American, which she was. But in order to protect herself and her son from danger, she had to disavow her heritage. She told the skinheads that she was just a poor white country girl, that she was on their side. The attack ended when a set of headlights from an oncoming car rounded the bend, and one of the guards told her never to tell anybody about this incident. They lined up military style, gave a Hitler salute, and sped off. 5 months later, Morris Dees and the Southern Poverty Law Center filed a lawsuit against Richard Butler and the Aryan nations. These men had the right to weave their small-minded ideology into our social fabric, but they had no right to tear at that fabric. Morris Dees had gone face to foot with the Klan before, and won despite a bomb attack on the center's offices in 1992 and several attempts on his life. He sued and bankrupted the white Aryan resistance in California, the United Klans of America in Alabama, and the Christian Knights of the Ku Klux Klan in South Carolina, all without accepting a dime in attorney's fees from those who had been terrorized by the Klan. The result in this case was no different. After a week-long trial, a jury returned a verdict of $6.3 million, a knockout blow to the Aryan nations in Idaho. The judge ordered them to turn their compound over to the Keenans, and all the buildings were burned down or removed. There's a great photo that I wish I could have shared with you of a building that stood on that compound with a corrugated steel roof and a Nazi swastika painted in the middle of it. And the picture shows a bulldozer driving up to it with its ripper primed to go through the swastika and tear down that building. Today, a human rights center stands not too far from where those scars of hate used to stand. The Southern Poverty Law Center has been fighting and winning cases like this for over 40 years now. Martin Luther King, the man we stand here to honor today, was not a lawyer. His name does not appear on the briefs the center files, on the letters we write, or on the reports we publish. But his legacy is the energy source for everything the center does. One of the great blessings of my life has been the opportunity to work for the center the past 2 summers. First in SPLC's Immigrant Justice Project in Atlanta, and then in their main office in Montgomery, Alabama. If you walk over to the bulletproof windows that line the north side of the Montgomery office and look down, you'll see Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, the church where Martin Luther King began his pastorate, and the church from which he started this great movement in defense of humanity. When I walk to work in the morning, I walk the same sidewalks that he walked, the same sidewalks that Rosa Parks walked. I ate at the same cafeterias he ate at the same tables that these freedom fighters organized the Montgomery bus boycotts. I even used to get my hair cut by Nelson Malden, Dr. King's personal barber. And there's things a barber knows about people that many other people don't know about Martin Luther King. But when you work at the Southern Poverty Law Center, you literally walk in these people's footsteps. I like to think, though, that everyone who works there started walking in their footsteps long before they ever set foot in the Deep South. I'm deeply humbled to join with you today. It's been an incredible day and a half on my first trip to Idaho. And I have to admit, when Joanne asked if I would come and do this, I was taken aback by the invitation. I know that she contacted the Law Center to request the incomparable Leisha Brooks, director of the Civil Rights Memorial Center, our outreach director, and someone I consider a second mother. And so when she ended up with me, it was akin to walking into a Mercedes-Benz dealership and walking out with a moped. It's really been an honor, though, learning from the great lawyers, the great advocates, staff, and security guards that make up the Southern Poverty Law Center over the past couple of years. I am by no means on their level, and so I apologize in advance. I'm simply, like many in the room, a student at the University of Washington, finishing up my law degree this year, who hopes to make some small contribution. I want to talk with you today about 2 factors that have enabled me to take the first step toward making that small contribution. A first step that spanned 3,000 miles from a comfortable life in Seattle to the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama. A step I had to take once I knew what the last names King and Singh had in common. King, Martin Luther King, shaped my sense of justice later in my life as a student. When I was in school, growing up, we'd listen to the I Have a Dream speech every year for Martin Luther King Day. They'd show it in black and white, and it felt just really historical. But it wasn't just the black and white that made it feel that way. It was the fact that I'd look around at school and see black and white, and brown, and yellow, and red, learning together. And I thought that King's dream had become a reality. And I took comfort in that. Each year we'd gather in the gymnasium, and we'd watch the I Have a Dream speech. And then after that, we'd break up into groups for a day of service. We would spend the day scraping gum off of desks, removing ivy off of trees from around campus, and coating the portables outside in fresh coats of paint, all in honor of King. It felt really weird at the time. I thought to myself, is this what that huge crowd of people did after he gave that speech? Did they all just disperse through Washington, D.C., scraping ivy and gum off of all the monuments? And that was my Santa Claus moment for Martin Luther King. I realized that this harmless black man wasn't real. I started listening to his other speeches, You know, the ones that make us take a hard look at ourselves, at our world, at our society. The ones that startle us and wake us up. King may have been talking about a dream, but he was a nightmare for those in power. Nightmares shake us out of our slumber and leave us wide awake in the reality that surrounds us. That's what King meant to America. He shook a sleeping society into consciousness when he spoke out against the Vietnam War, calling the United States government the world's greatest purveyor of violence, and describing the war as a demonic suction tube drawing men and skills and money away from the rehabilitation of our nation's poor. What would he say about American defense spending today? He pulled a superficial society into deeper awareness when he spoke out against extreme consumerism and said that he was afraid that there are too many people in America that are concerned with making a living rather than making a life. He cautioned against a shopping mall culture that subverts issues of general human concern when he urged America to rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. What would he say about our love affair with iPhones and iPads, I being the operative word? When I heard that king, the king that moved the apathetic so much so that they were willing to stare down dogs and water cannons, I realized that King's legacy is less about a historical struggle for black and white equality and more about what kinds of people we ought to be. Martin Luther King's house was bombed, and he was assassinated because he challenged systems of domination. And so when we Santa Clausify King and turn him into a historical relic worthy of a museum, when we defang, domesticate, manicure, and sanitize his legacy, we lose sight of the broader struggle for justice, a struggle that was controversial, at times incredibly unpopular, one that made him a marked man, and one that we continue today. My last name, Singh, obligates me to this effort. It is the name I carry as someone who aspires to the Sikh way of life. In America, those who practice the Sikh faith are simultaneously invisible and immediately noticeable with their colorful turbans and rich tradition. The Sikh scripture begins by establishing a belief in one universal integrative force. Sikhs conceptualize this force as truth and believe it is manifest in all beings and in all matter. The Sikh's goal in life is to fan the ember essence of the divine implanted within each of us and turn it into an inextinguishable flame of enlightenment. And when one achieves this state of enlightenment, one's spirit mingles with the divine like two cups of water mingle when they've been poured into the same vessel. One becomes inseparable from the Creator and thus God-like while still alive. One realizes a state of sovereignty in connectedness with truth. This personal revolution of the mind is designed to make the Sikh an agent for broader social revolution. Sikhs reject the Hindu caste system in the belief that all human beings are equal products of divine gift. Evidence of this commitment to equality can be found in the free community kitchens in every Gurdwara or Sikh house of learning. The first of 10 Guru prophets established the institution of the Langar Hall, a place where people from all four castes and all four directions could prepare and enjoy a meal together in a demonstration of common humanity, much like we're doing here today. Today, the Golden Temple in India, the most iconic Sikh house of learning, is the world's largest community kitchen. The operation there feeds 80,000 people each weekday and up to 120,000 people on Saturdays and Sundays, all free of charge, no questions asked. And every Gurdwara on the planet has a similar operation that is open 7 days a week so that no stomach is left empty and wrinkled with hunger, and so that we affirm our commitment to economic justice. My last name, a name I was given by the 10th Guru, also represents this commitment to equality. Guru Gobind Singh gave all Sikh males the last name Singh, meaning lion, and all Sikh females the last name Kaur, meaning princess. He did this to eliminate the markers of caste inherent in Indian last names. And he also did it to place women on an equal footing with their male counterparts. So while most women are forced to give up their last names in marriage, Sikh women maintain their sovereignty and a commitment to gender equality. The 10th Guru also instructed his Sikhs to keep their hair uncut and wrapped in a turban, which obviously I'm pretty bad at. Unshorn hair is a recognition that attempting to improve upon the creation of the perfect is an act steeped in ego. And the turban is designed to make the Sikh stand out, so that when an injustice demands action, he or she cannot hide and take cover in anonymity. And finally, the Guru required his Sikhs to remain armed at all times in order to defend the honor of the oppressed. He taught his Singh soldiers that it is only righteous to draw the sword from its scabbard when done in the pursuit of justice, never revenge, and when an affair is past all remedy. And so, my last name reflects the desire to meet the demands of this spiritual and social calling. King and Singh inform my understanding of justice and are major reasons why I've chosen to work at the Southern Poverty Law Center the last 2 summers. I've had the honor of working with people that live the values of Martin Luther King and the Sikh Gurus every day in their work at the center. In my brief time there, I've had the honor of working on a number of compelling cases, too. A month or 2 into my first summer with SPLC in Atlanta, I started feeling a craving for a home-cooked meal. In the absence of any Indian restaurants in Atlanta, I decided to take the hike an hour east on the subway to the nearest Gurdwara. I walked into the Langar Hall there and I got talking to a group of kids. I asked them what it was like growing up in the South, wearing a turban, and growing up as the only person that looked like that in their schools. And what I heard shocked me. I heard accounts of lockers filled with death threats. I heard accounts of never-ending harassment where 6 students were accused of being terrorists or members of the Taliban. I heard the account of a male student who was locked in the girls' bathroom after his peers beat him, tore off his turban, and unfurled his uncut hair. And I heard the story of a young girl who sat in her bathtub for over 2 hours after school one day, trying to scrub herself white when a teacher told her that her skin color made her inferior and that her faith was that of the devil. I heard stories that forced Sikh students to choose between their faith and their education when they walked through school doors. The next day at the office, I had to get it off my chest, and so I told one of the staff attorneys about these stories. A couple of emails and a couple of weeks later, on the 10th anniversary of the September 11th terror attacks, I was back at that Gurdwara in Stone Mountain, Georgia, doing a Know Your Rights presentation to educate these kids about their rights on school bullying. Since then, I've spoken with hundreds of Sikh school children across the South, and we've noticed a disturbing trend where schools have been made aware of mistreatment and suffering, but choose to do nothing to stop it. And when I was sitting here just now, listening to Laurel, that excerpt from Laurel's essay, I was deeply touched and moved by what she said. And it's incredible to me that she is at that level of consciousness when so many of these schools are not. And that to me says that age is not an indicator of wisdom. During my first summer, I also got to work on the largest human trafficking case in U.S. legal history. This case began after Hurricane Katrina and involves a shipbuilding company on the Gulf that promised nearly 500 workers from Southeast Asia, mostly pipe fitters and welders, good-paying jobs and a path to U.S. citizenship in exchange for a $10,000 recruitment fee. This company knew that there was no way these workers could pay off a $10,000 debt with the jobs that they promised them here in the U.S., without the jobs that they promised them here in the U.S. They knew that they could do whatever they wanted to these 500 men because after they paid that recruitment fee, they would have nothing to return back to in India and Thailand and wherever else they were from. And so the workers paid their own way to the Gulf and arrived to find themselves living behind barbed wire fences in a modern-day labor camp. They arrived to find themselves living 30 men each to rat-infested portables with no running water, no bathroom, and no heat. And worst of all, they had no way out. I also got to work on a case involving poultry plant workers who were routinely cheated out of their wages and who went to work each day in the harshest of conditions. They wear gloves that cause horrible skin conditions. They work under lines that are run at 3 times the recommended speed, meaning they have to work much faster than their hands will allow and under the constant threat of airborne projectiles. Chickens would come flying off these lines and hit people and seriously injure them. In some degree, I think what makes us human is our ability to feel, at least in some degree, what others feel totally. And this case exposed me to that when we went on an outreach trip to educate these workers about their rights. The managers of the poultry plants would never allow us to come and speak to the workers about their rights on the job. So what we had to do was we had to find them where they lived. We canvassed several trailer parks and a public housing development in 100-degree heat, going door to door in search of poultry plant workers. And in one dusty trailer park, we came across a family of 4, a mother, a father, and 2 children. They were from Mexico and were undocumented. The father worked at a poultry plant, and so we started talking with him about his rights to a safe, sanitary work environment and the wages he'd actually earned. When we got done, the mother invited us inside their trailer and insisted on fixing us lunch. They had nothing. They were the poorest of the poor, but they showed me more love than any stranger I've ever met. We recognized the humanity in each other, and then the father said something I'll never forget. We're not here to kill anyone or rob anyone, we just want to work. And that statement really touched me because it made clear that our fundamental desires as human beings aren't as different as the melanin levels in our skin would suggest. And Javier, I'm inspired by you too, wherever you are, because your work will ensure that these people's rights are protected as you move forward in your career. Another case SPLC is doing now, but one I haven't had the chance to work on, is being fought on behalf of our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. The case, which was filed just a couple of months ago in New Jersey, seeks to end conversion therapy, a horribly unscientific practice that promises to convert homosexuals into heterosexuals. What this sexual re-education actually does is put its subject through incredible amounts of psychological and emotional trauma. This case is still in its early stages, but it reflects SPLC's ability and agility in responding to threats that demand justice in the here and now. And Rebecca, I know you said you were thinking about retiring, but now is not the time, because I see you continuing your career and your future through to an end where all members of the LGBTQ community enjoy the human dignity they've been denied for too long. I want to end by getting the younger members of our group to start thinking about their place and the movement Martin Luther King started. How will all of you make your impression on the struggle for justice? How will you work to ease the life of this world? And how will you work to remove the barriers that we face in realizing our highest potential as human beings in every area of life, physically, intellectually, creatively, financially, socially? There'll be people along the way that tell you that things will always be messed up and that one person can't make a difference. But remember that there is a difference between living and existing. Those who live are remembered long after they're gone, leaving a record of their existence that is defined by how they served others. A record that transcends time and space. Meanwhile, those who exist are forgotten once they're gone, leaving no record at all of ever having been on this planet. Last night, as I was trying to think about what I wanted to get across this morning, I took what Sikhs call a hukamnama, or a directive from the Guru. You flip to a random page of the Sikh scripture, and the couplet that's on the top left page is your command from the divine. Here is what I was told. The battle drum beats in the ontological realm. A wound is inflicted. The warrior graces the field of battle. He or she either falls in delusion or stands in supreme connectedness. The warrior is defined by the defiant defense of righteousness. They may be cut piece by piece, but they never forsake the field of battle. I am blessed and honored to be standing before so many warriors today. May we never forsake the field of battle.